Imagine walking into a cafe for a simple cup of coffee, just another ordinary day, another routine moment. But what if, in that very instant, your entire world shifted? What if a single glimpse at a stranger's hand sent shivers down your spine and unraveled a past you thought was long buried? That's exactly what happened to Eduardo Almeida, a self-made millionaire who had everything, except for the one thing he never even knew he had lost. When Eduardo stepped into Café Nostalgia, he wasn't expecting anything unusual. A quick espresso, a quiet moment before another day of business. But fate had other plans. His eyes landed on an emerald ring, a ring that wasn't just familiar, but identical to the one he had given to Camila Vasquez, the love of his youth more than 25 years ago. The sight of it made his heart pound. Could it really be? Was it just a coincidence, or was the past reaching out to him in the most unexpected way? As questions flooded his mind, one thing became clear. He couldn't ignore this. That ring wasn't just a reminder of a love long gone. It was a key to a story he had unknowingly abandoned. A story that was about to rewrite everything he thought he knew about his past, his choices, and his own life. Because what Eduardo was about to discover would shake him to his core. He had a daughter he never even knew existed. But here's the real question. What would you do if the past you left behind suddenly found its way back to you? Would you face it, or would you run? Because for Eduardo, there was no running anymore. He was about to step into a truth that would change everything. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air at Café Nostalgia, a quaint little spot in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Eduardo Almeida, a self-made millionaire with a sharp mind for business, stepped inside, his movements precise, calculated, just like the way he handled deals worth millions. He wasn't a man prone to distractions. His routine was simple, a double espresso, no sugar, just as he liked. But that day, something shattered the predictability of his world. As he reached for his wallet, his eyes locked onto something that made his breath hitch, a green emerald ring shimmering under the soft cafe lights, resting on the finger of the young barista taking his order. For a moment, the noise of the cafe faded. The laughter, the chatter, the clinking of cups, it all became a distant murmur. That ring. It wasn't just any ring. It was identical to the one he had gifted Camila Vasquez, the love of his youth, more than 25 years ago. Back then, he believed it symbolized an unspoken vow, a shared destiny. But life, ever unpredictable, had other plans. A prestigious internship in São Paulo had called him away, and with the ambition of a man determined to carve his place in the world, he had left, choosing success over love. His gaze flickered back to the young woman behind the counter, Sophia. That was the name printed on her name tag. She looked to be in her early 20s, carrying an air of quiet confidence. There was something eerily familiar about her. Was it the eyes, the way she tilted her head when she smiled? It unsettled him, stirring something long buried. Eduardo was a man of logic, a strategist who didn't believe in fate. And yet, the unease in his chest whispered otherwise. His fingers drummed against the counter, his mind racing. How had that ring ended up here? What were the chances? Was this just an absurd coincidence, or was there a deeper story hidden beneath the surface? Eduardo had built his fortune on certainty, on numbers, on control. But at that moment, standing in that small cafe, staring at a ring from his past, he realized some things in life refuse to be ignored. Eduardo walked out of the cafe, but his mind stayed trapped in the past. The moment he saw that ring, it was as if someone had opened a hidden vault in his memory, flooding him with images of Camila Vasquez, her laughter, the way she used to tuck her hair behind her ear, the promises they once made. They had met in college, two dreamers caught in the whirlwind of young love. She had been his anchor, the one person who believed in him before the world did. But when the opportunity of a lifetime arrived, an elite internship in São Paulo, he had convinced himself that love could wait, that she would understand, that they would find a way. The last time they spoke, she had insisted on meeting him. There had been urgency in her voice, something different, something unspoken, but Eduardo, always the man with a plan, had postponed it. "We'll talk soon," he had assured her. Only that soon never came. He got swept away by the demands of his career, the endless work hours, the relentless pursuit of success. And before he knew it, time had moved forward without him looking back. Camilla had disappeared from his life, leaving nothing but a fading memory. Until now. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. Was it possible that the young woman at the cafe, Sophia, was somehow connected to Camilla? The ring was too specific, too personal to be a coincidence. But logic pushed back against the flood of emotions. Maybe it was a replica. Maybe Camilla had sold it or given it away. Or maybe, just maybe, this was the universe giving him a second chance to uncover the truth he once ignored. Eduardo was not a man who liked loose ends. The uncertainty gnawed at him, something deep inside telling him this was not just a random encounter. He needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. With a heavy exhale, he made a decision. He would find out who Sophia really was, and more importantly, he would find out what had happened to Camilla Vasquez after all these years. Eduardo wasn't the type of man to leave questions unanswered. Once a mystery presented itself, he had to solve it, whether in business or in life. This was no different. That same evening, he reached out to a trusted private investigator, Marcos Duarte, a man known for uncovering truths that others wanted buried. "Find everything you can about Sophia and her connection to Camilla Vasquez," Eduardo instructed. The weight in his chest only grew heavier as he waited. He had spent decades mastering control, yet now he felt like a man standing at the edge of something unknown. 2 days later, Marcos called back. His tone was different, calm, measured, as if bracing Eduardo for a truth too heavy to handle. "You're not going to believe this," he said. And then, in one single sentence, he shattered the foundation of Eduardo's reality. "Sophia is your daughter." The words hit like a tidal wave, knocking the air from Eduardo's lungs. His daughter. He had a daughter. He never knew, never had the chance. And all this time, she had been living in the same city, working in a small cafe, completely unaware that her father was just a few miles away. Rage and heartbreak collided inside him. How could Camilla have kept this from him? How could she make such a monumental decision on her own? Had she ever tried to reach him? The thought of all the years lost, of birthdays missed, of moments that would never return, it was unbearable. Eduardo had built an empire from the ground up, made millions, traveled the world. Yet at that moment, he felt like the poorest man alive. He paced the room, his mind racing. He needed to process this, but more than that, he needed answers. He wasn't the kind of man who let emotions rule his actions, but this was different. He had to see Camilla. He had to look her in the eyes and demand the truth. Because if one thing was clear, it was that his past was no longer in the past. It had just walked straight into his present. Eduardo didn't waste time. The moment he had an address, he drove straight to Camilla Vasquez's school, where she worked as a literature teacher. He wasn't sure what he expected, anger, regret, or maybe even relief. But one thing was certain, he needed answers. As he stepped into the modest school building, memories he had long suppressed resurfaced. He remembered the warmth in her eyes, the way she used to challenge him to dream bigger, the laughter they once shared. But now there was no laughter, only questions, and years of silence between them. When Camilla saw him, her expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. She didn't look shocked to see him, but rather as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Eduardo wasted no time. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was controlled, but beneath the surface, a storm raged. Camilla sighed, folding her arms as if bracing herself. "Because you had already chosen your future, Eduardo. You had your mind set on São Paulo, on your career. I knew that if I told you, you'd feel obligated, and I didn't want Sophia to grow up as someone's second priority." Her words cut deep, sharper than he expected. He had been so focused on success, on building his empire, that he had never considered what he might have left behind. But that didn't make this right. "You had no right to make that decision alone," he countered, his voice heavy with emotion. "I lost years with her, years I can never get back." Camilla's eyes softened, but her stance remained firm. And do you think she didn't lose anything? She grew up asking about her father, and all I could do was tell her he was a good man who wasn't ready to be a father. Eduardo exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He had spent his whole life in control, but this was something he couldn't negotiate or rewrite. The past had been decided. But the future? That was still in his hands. He looked at Camilla, searching for something, remorse, guilt, or maybe even the hope that they could fix this. "Does she know?" he finally asked. Camilla hesitated before answering. "Not yet, but it's time she does." That evening, Camilla sat across from Sophia at their small kitchen table, hands clasped, eyes filled with a mix of hesitation and resolve. This was a conversation she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind, but never had the courage to speak aloud. Taking a deep breath, she finally said the words that would change everything. "Your father is alive, and he's been living in this city all along." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to something deeper, a quiet storm brewing behind her eyes. "What?" Sophia's voice barely rose above a whisper, as if saying it louder would make it more real. "You told me he left before I was born, that he wasn't part of the picture." Camilla swallowed hard. "I told you he wasn't ready to be a father, and at the time that was the truth. He had a dream, a career ahead of him, and I made the decision to let him go without telling him about you." But Sophia didn't seem to hear the explanation. Her mind was racing too fast, piecing together all the missing fragments of her life. 24 years of half-truths, of wondering, of never knowing. "So he never abandoned me?" she asked, her voice laced with something Camilla had feared, resentment. "You abandoned him for me?" Camilla's heart clenched. "I did what I thought was best. I wanted to protect you from growing up feeling like a burden to someone who wasn't ready." But the words rang hollow to Sophia now. The truth had been hidden from her, and no matter how good the intentions, it didn't change the fact that a choice had been stolen from her. "And now he just shows up?" she asked bitterly. "What does he want?" Camilla reached for her daughter's hand, but Sophia pulled away, standing up abruptly. "He wants to meet you," Camilla admitted, her voice softer now. "He wants to know you." Sophia let out a shaky breath, torn between anger and curiosity. She had spent her whole life without a father. She didn't need one now, but the weight of the truth was too heavy to ignore. "Fine," she finally said. "I'll meet him. But he doesn't get to walk in and fix things overnight." Camilla nodded, knowing this was just the beginning. The wounds of the past had been reopened, and now it was up to them whether they would heal or leave scars forever. Eduardo had faced boardrooms full of ruthless investors, closed multi-million-dollar deals, and built an empire from the ground up. But nothing, absolutely nothing, made his hands tremble like the thought of meeting Sophia. He arrived at the cafe early, dressed in a crisp suit, a habit he never abandoned. But today it felt out of place. This wasn't a business deal he could negotiate his way through. This was his daughter, a stranger, yet someone who carried his blood, his history, his lost years. He exhaled sharply, his heart pounding as he saw her walk in, her posture stiff, her expression unreadable. Sophia sat across from him, arms crossed, her gaze sharp and guarded. "So you're Eduardo Almeida," she said, her tone cool but not hostile. He nodded, unsure of where to start. "And you're Sophia." The words felt inadequate. How do you introduce yourself to your own child after 24 years? He cleared his throat. "I know this must be overwhelming. I never knew. If I had, I swear I would have—" But Sophia cut him off. "You would have what? Given up your dream? Stayed for a daughter you didn't even plan on having?" Her words were laced with sarcasm, but beneath it, he could hear something else, pain. Eduardo leaned forward, his voice steady, but full of emotion. "I can't change the past, Sophia, but I can change what happens now. I don't expect you to accept me overnight. I just want a chance to know you." She studied him, her fingers tapping against the table, processing the weight of it all. "You don't get to just appear and fix things," she finally said. "I built my life without you. I don't need a father now. Her words hit hard, but Eduardo didn't flinch. Instead, he simply nodded. I understand. But needing and wanting are different things. I'm not asking for anything except the opportunity to earn a place in your life. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them wasn't just physical. It was built from years of absence, of unanswered questions, of a life lived apart. But then, just as she was about to stand, Sophia hesitated. Something in his eyes, maybe the sincerity, maybe the regret, made her pause. And in that split second, the wall between them cracked just a little. She didn't forgive him. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, she was willing to listen. Days turned into weeks, and though Sophia still kept her guard up, she didn't push Eduardo away entirely. Conversations were awkward but steady, like two strangers trying to navigate an unfamiliar road. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the cafe, Eduardo decided to break the silence with something different. "Tell me about your dreams," he said. Sophia, caught off guard, blinked. She hadn't expected that question. "Dreams," she echoed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know, I guess I've always wanted to open my own restaurant someday." The moment she said it, a small, almost embarrassed smile crossed her face, like someone revealing a secret they never thought they'd say out loud. Eduardo's mind immediately began spinning with ideas. He had spent his life turning visions into reality, and this was something he could actually help with. "Then why haven't you?" he asked, genuinely curious. Sophia shrugged. "Money, for starters. And besides, mixing business with family, that never ends well." She glanced at him, gauging his reaction. He chuckled softly. "That's funny. I built my career by investing in people who had ideas, but lacked the resources. But the one person I actually want to invest in doesn't trust me enough to accept my help." There was no bitterness in his voice, only honesty. Sophia shifted in her seat, uncomfortable but thoughtful. "I just don't want this to be a way for you to buy a relationship with me," she admitted. Eduardo leaned forward. "This isn't about money, Sophia. It's about building something together. I missed so much of your life already, but if there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to make a dream happen. And if this is yours, I want to be a part of it." Sophia looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time without suspicion clouding her judgment. He wasn't trying to fix the past. He was offering to build something in the present. For the first time, she considered the idea, not just the restaurant, but the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could create something together. A fresh start, a shared vision. It wouldn't erase the past, but it could shape the future. And maybe, despite all the resentment, all the lost time, this was a beginning worth exploring. Months of planning, late-night discussions, and hesitant compromises led to this very moment. The grand opening of Raíces Renovadas, the restaurant Sophia had once only dreamed about. The sign above the entrance gleamed under the warm evening lights, and inside, the air buzzed with excitement. It wasn't just about the food or the business, it was about something much deeper. This restaurant wasn't just a place, it was a bridge, a symbol of reconciliation, of second chances. Eduardo stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, watching as Camilla and Sophia moved through the crowd, greeting guests, making sure everything ran smoothly. For so long, he had imagined fatherhood as something he had lost the chance to experience. But tonight, seeing Sophia step into her own future, he realized that being a father wasn't about the years missed, it was about showing up now. As guests settled into their seats, Sophia took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room. She hadn't prepared a speech, but the moment felt too important to let pass. "I used to think that family was something permanent. You either had it or you didn't," she began. "But what I've learned is that family is something you build. It's forgiveness, it's effort, it's showing up. And today this restaurant isn't just my dream, it's a dream we created together." The room fell silent for a moment before applause erupted. Eduardo felt something tighten in his chest, a mix of pride, relief, and maybe even redemption. He met Camilla's gaze across the room, and for the first time in years, there was no resentment there, only understanding. They had made mistakes, taken different paths, but in the end, they had both chosen to put Sophia first. That was what mattered. As the night went on, laughter and conversation filled the restaurant. The weight of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, woven into something new. Eduardo, Camila, and Sophia weren't just individuals trying to mend what was broken. They were a family, creating something stronger than before. And as he watched his daughter take in the moment, he knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. As Eduardo stood at the entrance of Maid'S Renovadas, watching the last guests leave, he felt something unfamiliar, a sense of completeness. He had spent decades believing that success was measured in numbers, deals, and power. But standing there, seeing Sophia laughing with the restaurant staff, seeing Camilla smiling as she wiped down a table, he realized this was the real measure of success. Not wealth, not prestige, but connection, purpose, family. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing something. He had finally arrived. Sophia, wiping her hands on her apron, walked over to him. "You're staring," she said with a smirk. Eduardo chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm just proud." The words felt foreign coming from him, but they were true. Sophia looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "Yeah, me too." The walls between them had taken time to break down, but now there was no rush. They weren't trying to fix the past anymore. They were building the future. Camilla joined them, leaning against the counter. "So," she said, arms crossed, "does this mean you're finally retiring and settling down?" Eduardo scoffed. "Retiring, please. But maybe I'll spend less time in the office and more time here." The words came out naturally, and he was surprised by how much he meant them. He had built an empire for himself, but this was something worth building for someone else. As the lights dimmed in the restaurant, the three of them stood together in silence. Maid'S Renovadas wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol. Proof that no matter how much time was lost, no matter how many mistakes were made, it's never too late to rebuild, to reconnect, to start again. Eduardo had spent his life believing that the past was set in stone, but tonight, he knew. The future was still his to create. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Eduardo Almeida walked into a cafe for a simple cup of coffee, but walked out with an entire past he never knew existed. He thought he had control over his life, that success was measured by wealth and power. But in the end, it wasn't his fortune that mattered. It was the family he never knew he had. And now let me ask you, how many things in your life have you left unresolved? How many relationships have you abandoned, thinking time would erase them? The truth is, time doesn't erase anything. It only buries it deeper, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Maybe there's a conversation you need to have, a truth you need to face, a relationship you need to rebuild. Because if Eduardo's story teaches us anything, it's that it's never too late to reconnect, to heal, and to start again. So tell me, what's something in your past that still calls to you? Are you going to ignore it, or are you finally going to face it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful lesson like this one. Because trust me, sometimes the most unexpected moments hold the biggest transformations.